All right, let's talk Dallas Cowboys. I'm Nick, and this is our daily Cowboys show. The Cowboys are obviously preparing for their Week 1 matchup against Philadelphia, just a few days away now. We got some interesting news when it comes to both sides of the football, some strategic decisions, some roster decisions, a lot of stuff to get into. But on this channel, like we like to do almost every single day, is showcase our stat of the day as a little palate cleanser, if you will. And without further ado, let's pull it up. This is courtesy of the Cowboys Music Account. It's an interesting account to follow on social media if you're on the Twitter or X platform. It's just highlighting the most career rushing touchdowns by an NFC East player. Emmitt Smith, number 1, makes sense, all-time leading rusher. Otis Anderson and Jonathan Riggins with time with the Giants and Washington, respectively. And then Tony Dorsett and Ezekiel Elliott right there behind Riggins and Anderson. And you can basically see right here, three of the top 5 touchdown leaders in the NFC East are all Dallas Cowboys. It again speaks to the power and historical dominance of the Cowboys from the 70s and 80s with Dorsett, obviously the 90s with Emmitt Smith, and even that 2016 to 2021, Ezekiel Elliott era with the Dallas Cowboys. So even though there hasn't been really any significant postseason success to speak of over the last 30 years, I don't like when people just focus on that and throw the baby out with the bathwater, because there were some special years, especially those early Zeke Elliott years, phenomenal. I mean, just incredible highlights with 16, 18. I mean, he was such a good player, even through 2021. I know a lot of people are just so hyper-focused on postseason success, as you should be, right? That's what really matters. But I don't want us to completely discount the greatness of a lot of players we saw, even though there wasn't a lot of postseason success. And I think Zeke Elliott was one of those guys in his prime at the top of that list. All right, let's get into the news here. First report here, I thought this was very interesting. It's from Patrick Walker over at Voice of the Star. Great follow on X if you're looking for some good Cowboys news. I wouldn't bet against DeMarvion Overshown, was Shotty's comment when it came to Overshown's ability to rush the passer. Demo can do anything. All right, so this is very interesting. Obviously, with Micah Parsons gone, it's going to be a question mark of how the Cowboys going to recreate the pass rush that effect that he certainly had. And it's going to be hard to get all the way up to everything Parsons did as a pass rusher. Obviously, an outstanding player with what he did for the Cowboys getting after the quarterback. And I think people look at their defensive end group and their edge rushers, Williams, Ezeraku, Houston, Fowler, and they say, okay, maybe in the aggregate we can get close. But I think Schottenheimer brings up an interesting point here. When Overshown returns both the end of this season and for future seasons, he is a really sort of underrated pass rusher. Let's pull up some data here to highlight what I'm talking about. This is the top pass rushing linebackers last year, according to PFF. And you can see DeMarvion Overshown right there in the top, was that 7 or 8 guys, and the entire National Football League getting after the quarterback from a linebacker perspective. I think Overshown is not going to be like a Parsons figure where they move him to edge exclusively and say, hey man, you're now an edge rusher. But I think what the Cowboys have here with Overshown, again, if he returns healthily and he's putting in the work, he seems all accounts full speed ahead, they're going to have an underrated weapon here ready to unleash in DeMarvion Overshown. And I know a lot of people outside Dallas, and because he's been hurt, there is some question marks there, and the injury concerns are valid. But if he returns and if he's as good as he was flashing last season, the Cowboys may not, as weird as this sounds, may be able to replace Micah Parsons. They may not need him just because in the aggregate with all the different playmakers, certainly young guys, you look at Ezeraku, Williams, Oso Adikizu at 3 technique, you look at a guy here like Overshown, they may be able to recreate the pass rush productivity across a bunch of different players. And if they manage to do that while picking up all those extra draft picks and, of course, Kenny Clark and the cap space, it may turn out to be a massive win in terms of the trade for the Dallas Cowboys. This is one of those things that we sort of forget and just look at a player, just in isolation and say, oh, Micah Parsons is great, he's outstanding, losing him really stinks. And that's true. But there is something that I think Bill Simmons, the famous commentator, called the Ewing effect, talking about Patrick Ewing, the great NBA player, I believe in the late 1990s. He missed a lot of time with the Knicks due to an injury one season, and the Knicks record actually improved. And the rationale behind that was when a superstar leaves or gets hurt or whatever, the players around him have the opportunity to step up and showcase their own talents and their own skills, and as a team, they're better. Now, I don't know if that will happen with Parsons or not, but when you look at Overshown's pass rushing ability, you listen to Shotty's comments here, it's clear the Cowboys, if you look at all the individual pieces here, if they all step up and play up to their talent and are used the correct way, there's a chance they could actually outperform or at the very least meet Parsons' productivity as a pass rusher. And I think if the Cowboys are able to do that, that will be a huge, obviously massive opportunity for them to win the trade outright, especially when you consider the additional draft capital, Kenny Clark, all the cap space. Something to keep an eye on. Obviously, Overshown's hurt. We won't see this till the second half of 2025, but I think this is sort of an indication that there are more pass rush weapons, there are more sort of opportunities for Cowboys playmakers on the defensive side of the football than just Micah Parsons. All right, next report here. This made the big news yesterday. Ian Rappaport has the tweet. Sources, the Cowboys and standout quarterback Daron Bland have agreed to terms on a big new contract extension as Dallas locks up a key defender. It's a 4-year, $92 million extension for Bland done by agent Josh Arnold, a deal that includes $50 million guaranteed. Look, a lot of people are saying this was done as sort of a distraction, right? The Micah Parsons deal happens, and then you just sign Daron Bland, and just a way to sort of obfuscate for what happened with Parsons. Based on all reporting, this discussion has been going on for a long time. Now, of course, what could have probably happened is that after the Parsons trade was finished, a lot of the Cowboys front office personnel now had more time on their hands and they were able to finalize this deal, right? That could have certainly been a factor. I don't think this was a PR stunt by Jerry Jones or the Dallas Cowboys leadership just to try and obfuscate and try and, just sort of cover up the Micah Parsons story with another deal, right? Trying to sit there and say, oh, see, we're able to play pairs. Look, we played Daron Bland, Micah Parsons, we wanted to pay him and then he left kind of thing. I don't think that's what this attempt was at all. This has been reportedly going on for weeks and sometimes months behind the scenes, specifically with Daron Bland. And I think this is a really good deal. If we pull up this little table here I got from overthecap.com, this is the top corners in terms of payment last year, and you can see the average per year on the right, and this is before Daron Bland's deal, so keep that in mind. So you can see here, Daron Bland, just to go back to his deal, right? We're looking at a 4-year, $92 million extension, so quick math there, we're looking at $23 million annualized per year. So you go over here on the right side of the screen, you can see that $23 million would be just south of Patrick Surtain and just ahead of AJ Terrell. So we're not talking about resetting the market here. We're talking about a team-friendly kind of deal, right? Anytime you've got a player that, remember, in 2023 was a Defensive Player of the Year finalist. In 2022, was sort of emerging as a Defensive Rookie of the Year guy. And in 2024, which was supposedly his worst year, obviously had a lot of injury concerns, missed a lot of time. The defense had a lot of issues. New coaching staff in terms of what Zimmer being the defensive coordinator. He still had a coverage grade over 70, right? Again, very solid player, despite not a lot of interceptions, of course, not a lot of big plays. The game-winning play against Tampa not included, of course. That was a fantastic effort by Bland. But there's a lot of great corners. For example, you see J.C. Horn a little bit above there at $25 million. He did not play well last year. Jalen Ramsey had some ups and downs, right? Sauce Gardner's had some ups and downs. I think Stingley and Surtain have been absolutely outstanding, but I think Daron Bland, even as bad as things were for Dallas last year defensively and the injuries with Bland, he still was a very solid, capable starter, and in 2023, he was all-time great. So to get him at this price, this deal, it's a good deal for the Dallas Cowboys. I think there's some people, and just a quick sidebar here about this, there's some talking head, columnist guy, I think over at ESPN, he posted a response to this deal. It's like, oh, this is the Cowboys once again doing a stupid thing. They talk about stopping the run, and they just signed extended a corner who last year ranked 80th in run stopping for the cornerback position. And this is why it's really important, and I think this is what people at ESPN and Fox Sports and all those big networks don't understand, is that these sort of columnists and talking heads, these personalities, they spend about 2 seconds doing research, right? There's so many different things that just come up when it came to Bland's performance last year. New defensive coordinator, injuries, defensive problems, right? If you just cherry pick a couple of games from an injury-shortened season from Daron Bland, you'll find some random stats that don't look good. You can do that with everybody. Right, but that's what the talking heads do. Because it's Dallas, because they get clicks, because they get engagement, because they get eyeballs, they just want to sit there and say, oh, everything Dallas does is just absolutely disastrously stupid. This was a great deal for Dallas. This was a good job by the Dallas Cowboys, locking up a quality corner, great locker room guy, great dude, two-way man, coaches, front office, teammates, media personnel that have to engage with Daron Bland on a regular basis. They all say he's a fantastic guy, hard worker. Again, this deal was happening behind the scenes for months. There was no sort of debate. There was no sort of consternation from Daron Bland. In fact, even during training camp, they were in negotiations to pay him all this money, and the Cowboys were moving him to different spots, nickel corner, outside corner, back and forth, right? We all know that nickel corners traditionally make a little less than outside corners. There was no consternation from Daron Bland. There was no agent leaking a press release saying he's not happy with the Dallas Cowboys. He just showed up to work and did what he was told in terms of the coaching staff to the best of his ability, and he was rewarded with a big payday. This is what it's talking about, guys. When we talk about culture, when we talk about changing the direction of the Dallas Cowboys, what Schottenheimer's trying to implement, Daron Bland, again, changing positions in the middle of a contract negotiation, doing what he's told, being a team-first guy, focusing on doing what's best for him in the context of the team, not just what's best for him. And the result is you get compensated, I think, very fairly. Again, $92 million, $50 million guaranteed, nothing to sneeze at. And it's a good deal for the Dallas Cowboys. So across the board, this checks every box in terms of what the Cowboys are trying to do. Culture guy, 100%. Team first guy, 100%. Team friendly deal, 100%. Big check to compensate good players, 100%. Nice job all around here with the Daron Bland deal. All right, next report here. The Cowboys released their captains yesterday. The 2025 captains. This is courtesy of Nick Harris at the Fort Worth Star-Telegram. The guys are defensive tackle Oso Odighizuwa, safety Donovan Wilson, quarterback Dak Prescott, wide receiver CeeDee Lamb, kicker Brandon Aubrey, and cornerback CJ Goodwin. So they broke it down in terms of having 2 defensive captains, 2 offensive captains, and 2 special teams captains. Relatively standard kind of stuff there. I think Oso Odighizuwa being a captain, I think is an interesting, I don't want to say surprise, but I think it's an indication of a defensive line group that looking for a new leader, and Oso Odighizuwa, I think, has emerged as that guy, right? He is now, with Parsons gone, I believe the most highly compensated guy on the defensive line. He's a good football player, obviously. He's got high expectations in front of him. So again, him being the captain, him earning that captainship, it's a good sign that he's taking that new contract, new situation here in Dallas very seriously and doing well with that. That's good there. Donovan Wilson getting, I thought, was very interesting. And I think Wilson's one of those guys where his performance can be disappointing at times. I mean, he's a playmaking safety that flies all over with reckless abandon. I mean, he'll miss a lot of tackles. He'll give us some big plays, but he'll force some fumbles. He'll get some interceptions. He'll fly all over the field. And, to speak to how good Donovan Wilson is, I'm not a huge believer in Wilson as a player, but he clearly has done something to impress Schottenheimer and the coaching staff to be sort of a leader, a locker room force. And this is one of those things where it gets really tough when it comes to making decisions as a coach that people don't really think about. When you have guys, especially if you're a new coach, that literally are buying into everything, that are great leaders, great team first guys, but maybe they're slipping in performance a little bit, you get put in a tough position. And I think Wilson is one of those guys that had very quietly a solid training camp, but had a very, very bad 2024 campaign and not a spectacular 2023 either, right? So I think one of the things when it came to Donovan Wilson was, well, is he going to stick around? And I think the Dallas Cowboys looked at what he did in training camp and looked at what he did with his new coaching staff and said, yeah, he's going to roll here. And it'll be very interesting to see how that turns out, because I thought Donovan Wilson was potentially a guy that could have gotten cut, right? If they really liked some of their safeties or wanted to move Mukuamu to safety, like maybe Wilson's the odd man out. It turns out not only is he not the odd man out, he's the captain. It's a very interesting development there. Prescott makes sense. CeeDee Lamb, this is perfect. I love this. This may be my favorite move that Schottenheimer's made the last couple of days, by far. I think CeeDee Lamb emerged last season, down year, missing the postseason with the injuries, quarterback situation. CeeDee Lamb with his own personal injuries, right? And battling through it, right? In obvious pain, obvious shoulder discomfort, to put it very mildly, like severe injury stuff. And he's battling through it, right? He has to leave games, come back into games, and just being a star, hyper productive, despite all of the issues, despite all of the injuries, right? The entire team that was supposed to be around him isn't playing, right? You look at Dak Prescott, he's out. Zach Martin is hurt, of course. Brandon Cooks missed a large portion of the season, right? Ferguson was disappointing, and even he had some injuries, right? You can go on and on and on. And you look at CeeDee Lamb and said, all right, well, I guess I'm the guy. And he became the guy and battled through it with a great mindset, great approach, what he's done this offseason, what he's done in training camp. And I talked about it the other day, and I think it's so important. The sort of, if the juxtaposition of the Cowboys in the preseason has sort of 2 images. One, CeeDee Lamb celebrating his teammates making a big play, being a little too overzealous and getting run over by a ref. And Micah Parsons laying during a game while his teammates are battling for their roster lives or NFL lives, lying on his back on a training table without a care in the world, right? Those are the 2 juxtapositions. One guy is gone, Parsons. One guy is here and promoted to captain. I love this move. I think CeeDee Lamb has emerged as one of the legit captains on this team, just based on an outsider's perspective. And I'm glad to see you get that spot officially. All right, next report here. How about injuries getting ready for week 1? Another day of Tyler Guyton being on the field for Cowboys practice during the immediate viewing period. Brace on his right knee today. Again, seems to be trending in the right direction. Will he play Thursday against Philadelphia? Still up in the air. I'm willing to bet no, but we'll have to see. Trayvon Diggs, another injury report, seems to be trending in the right direction. He says week 4 at the absolute latest, potentially could play week 1. So we'll have to see how it all shakes out. My betting money is that neither Diggs or Guyton play against Philadelphia. That's just where my head's at. And then one or both of them will probably play against New York, right, week 2. That's my gut feeling based on what's happening now. But it's really hard to tell with these injuries and game day, things like that. It's one of those things where a player can be trending in the right direction. We saw this a lot last year. And then suddenly they minor setback, like, okay, you got to sit for a week, right? And so getting guys on the practice field and doing some good things and going through drills is outstanding. I guess the question to me is, will they be 100% ready to go for Thursday night against Philadelphia? That's up in the air, but it's very clear the Cowboys, the beat up, the injuries, they're sort of coming to a positive conclusion here when it comes to Guyton, when it comes to Diggs. The rookie Savon Revel continues to trend in the right direction with his injury. That'll be much later. Overshown, we highlighted yesterday, he's trending in the right direction too. That will, of course, be much later. But overall, I think the injury concerns for Dallas, and they had a healthy amount of them going into the season, are trending in the right direction. So that's all good to see there. All right, this last report here, I just want to highlight something. So this was from a screenshot I took of the top headlines from the NFL ESPN homepage. And I just want to just really highlight something here. And going back to sort of what's going on with Dallas and the Micah Parsons situation, I thought this was very important, very insightful. So these are their top headlines. So number one is the Cowboys. The source Cowboys Bland reached $92 million extension. You have the Panthers making a deal. You have the Vikings making a deal. Talk about the great Leroy Jordan unfortunately passing away. And then you have Micah Parsons talking about an interview, his fresh start with the Green Bay Packers. Here's where I think a lot of people, and Micah Parsons specifically, this is where he was wrong. And this is why his value, his quote-unquote net worth, his market value, just took like a 20-30% hit, right? Going from Dallas to Green Bay. He went from being the talk of the town to being just another guy overnight, right? He's still a great player. He's still an outstanding player. But you can see, look at these headlines. 2 of the top, 6 are Cowboys. And Micah Parsons, again, one of the best players in football, right? Defensive superstar, great pass rusher, new team, good team, made the playoffs last couple of years. And he's relegated behind 2, to be totally fair, no disrespect to the late, great Jordan or Daron Bland's extension, but 2 mid-tier stories in terms of quality of player and relevancy to like winning a Super Bowl today. Right? That's who Parsons is now with Green Bay. That's who he's become. He's become a second-rate news headline. He will be pretty much forgotten in the context of everyone's National Football League zeitgeist, except for, hardcore fans and whenever Green Bay plays like in a national championship or a national televised kind of game. And that's just what's going to happen. It happens to Cowboys all the time. People remember Dalton Schultz, right? Dalton Schultz was he's a good player for Dallas. He's a really quality tight end. He goes to Houston. People forgot about him. Right? What's going on here? You talk to Texans fans, they're not happy with Dalton Schultz. How about Pollard? Oh, he's a star running back, superstar running back. Goes to the Tennessee Titans. So, where's Tony Pollard? Has anyone seen Tony Pollard? Right? That's just the reality. A lot of these players don't understand that when they're with Dallas, they get all this media attention, all this publicity. Your podcast opportunities, Parsons, just took a 90% cut. No one cares anymore. Right? All your subscribers are just, who cares, right? Because you're not talking about the Cowboys, right? That's the power of the Cowboys brand. And I think a lot of people, and Parsons included, are just going to get really just smacked with reality in a second. Like, oh my goodness, I thought I was just the media draw. Turns out the star is the media draw. Me being a great player, I'm able to capitalize on that and monetize my brand and build my brand more. Parsons, and I think his agent, I would assume his agent knows this, but Parsons himself, I don't think he understands what's about to happen to his personal brand. He's going to be relegated, right? He's going to be just another good player. He's going to be like Garrett in Cleveland, right? Whereas, hey, really good player, phenomenal player. Are we going to talk about Micah Parsons that much? Not anymore, guys. And I think that's what people who leave Dallas just don't understand. And whether Parsons may have wanted that, I don't know. He seems to me like a guy who likes attention, who likes publicity. Obviously, he's got his own show and own podcast. I don't think he realizes the difference between playing for Dallas and playing for a team like Green Bay. We're talking about a massive delta in terms of media attention, and we'll see how he likes it. Right? He'll be I think he'll be very surprised as his eyeballs on him and everything with the Parsons effect in Green Bay drop dramatically versus where they were in Dallas. All right, let's get to the comments from yesterday. I appreciate everyone for being patient in the past couple of days. I worked through technical difficulties and and being on the road. It's one of those things, right? My computer destroys and completely shuts down and crashes literally as the biggest trade in the past 5 years for the Dallas Cowboys happened. It's one of those things you can't make that up. All right, let's get things started with a comment from a member. Again, member comments, I will always prioritize. If you comment as a member, I will always get to you. I will always shout you out. That's my guarantee. If you're not a member and you comment, I will do my best to get to you, but there's just a lot of comments, not a lot of time. So this comment here from member Bubba Baker 6244 talking about sort of follow up with the trade. It was really surprising to see how many people thought that Dallas got hosed, but everyone here knows that we won that deal hands down. Right, fellas? Come on. Okay, phew. You had me going there. Yeah, I don't think anyone smart thinks that Dallas got completely hosed. I also don't think it's smart to say Dallas completely won the trade outright, right? It'll take a few years. It'll have to see what they do with those draft picks to see how everything shakes out. From the Packers' perspective, if they don't win a Super Bowl over the next 2 to 3 years, it was a total failure. right? Because that's the thing. They're already a playoff team. They've already won a playoff game. Jordan Love, they have their quarterback, right? If they go to the playoffs and they win a playoff game or two but get knocked out in the divisional round or wild card round or whatever, then it's a failure, right? They went all in and it failed, right? Because there's going to be consequences, salary cap consequences for the Packers starting around 2027, 2028, and it's going to get worse for them. This is a team that's going to have some issues in a couple of years. So they have basically 2 years, 3 years, absolute maximum. They have 2025, 2026, maybe 2027. I kind of doubt it to win a Super Bowl. If they don't, they lost the trade. That's just undeniable. Now, for the Cowboys to win the trade, they have to hit on their draft picks or whatever. If they trade those picks for other players, they have to do well with those picks, right? That's the key part there. And they also have to develop and bring out some of these other younger players to step up. The Sam Williamses, the Overshowns, right? Oso Odigizua taking on a new role. Nealand, all these guys. Azaraku, of course. So it's going to take time to figure out who won or lost the trade, who got host, who didn't. Way too early to say. But I think for anyone to have an opinion one way or the other, and especially the prevailing wisdom here by people in the media, again, not exactly the sharpest tacks in the drawer in most cases, are saying the Cowboys got host on the trade. It's just false, right? I mean, it's way too early to tell. And the fact is, history tells you that when teams get this superstar defender and give up a receiver, any big time trade or an acquisition, that the success rate is 50-50 at best. Everyone likes to bring up Reggie White or let's say Deion Sanders as a free agent signing. And I think the great Ron Wolf, I think the former GM of the Packers, said, listen, there's only 2 free agents that have ever worked out in NFL history, and that's Reggie White and Deion Sanders, right? And we're talking over a decades-long period here. And that's, of course, because the hit rate for these kind of guys is very, very minimal. Excuse me. All right, let's get into the comments from yesterday's video. Plague Doctor, regular commenter, thank you. Commented, I still think they did this rebuild backwards. You kept Lamb, who's worth every penny, agreed, but you overpaid Dak, who has even less success than Parsons in the playoffs. Going off your point that if you're getting top dollar, you have to produce, and in big games, Dak has not, and he's the highest paid NFL player. If you're rebuilding, you let Dak walk and get top 10 picks for the next 2 to 3 seasons. Keep Parsons for when you rebuild. What's functionally the difference between 4-13 and 8-9? If you aren't competing in the playoffs, you aren't competing. I'm not about moral victories. I think one of the things that's interesting here, and I don't disagree with where your head's at there. Now, I think Dak Prescott it does a better job than people think, although his contract is large. But remember, Dak Prescott's contract was made before the Schottenheimer hire, right? His extension before the Browns game last year, before they played in Cleveland. The Micah Parsons deal is a situation that happened recently. So when the Cowboys made that extension with Dak Prescott last year, they were still under the Mike McCarthy model that they were actually chasing a championship in the short term or a deep postseason run in the short term. So when they made that deal, that's where they were. And now where they are now, which is a little bit more of a rebuild, a little bit more towards the future. And Dak Prescott's contract isn't conducive to trading, right? If they trade him or cut him, not that they would, but if they did, it would be a massive cap hit, a lot of dead money against the cap. So it's one of those things where it's like, even if you were to find a trade partner, the cap constraints and cap hit on your end would basically wipe out and then some all of the cap space from the Micah Parsons deal. So I don't disagree with what your head's at. I just think in practicality, because of the contract that Dak Prescott signed, you just can't really do anything with him. And that was probably the biggest mistake that the Cowboys made with Prescott, is that he had a great 2023 and an MVP caliber season, and they paid him money as if he would be an MVP caliber player for the next half decade. And we're going to have to see if he lives up to that. I think he'll be great this year, by the way. But I think you bring up a great point, is like, listen, we have Dak Prescott, who hasn't produced in the postseason, agree 100%, and now he's on a big deal. The reality is that was a deal negotiated, obviously, last year when they were in a different mindset. So you have to live in the world you are right now. I bet if the Cowboys, could go back in time, they probably would have done that deal differently if they know what they know now, but they don't, and they're kind of stuck in the situation. All right, this was an interesting comment from Broderick Johnson, 1427. I kind of want to highlight this. If Clark wasn't 30, I would love this trade, talking about, of course, the new defensive tackle, Clark, and his age and veteran experience. I think it's the other way around, because, again, we're talking about a younger defense. You need a veteran presence. I think the leadership aspect of Clark is going to be very, very important to this Cowboys. Because if you look at the group up front here and you say, well, who's the leader here? You look at Fowler, who's a veteran, right? Okay, he's been around the block, outstanding. Ezeraku, young player. Williams, young player. Nealand, young player. Houston, scratching and clawing to get on an NFL roster. Oso Odigizua, veteran, but it's not like he's been around the block 10 years, right? You look at Toya, young player. Mozzie Smith, obviously, is a younger player. You start looking around and you say, okay, Solomon Thomas, he's a good player, veteran player, but he's a backup, right? Who's a stud, who's a big time contributor, who's a veteran in the front seven, right? You look at even Murray or Sanborn, they're veterans. Certainly Murray is, but he's not a guy that's ever been like a superstar or considered a high quality player. Clark is a veteran, been around the block, pros pro, who is also a high quality player, kind of a leadership kind of role. Way too early, of course, to ever be named a captain for Dallas, at least this season, like we talked about with the Cowboys captaincy. But don't undersell his age and experience and the influence he can have as a quality player on the rest of the front seven, specifically defensive line. This could be a move to potentially develop and work with, let's say, Toya and Mozzie Smith as well. So there's some different other factors here. I understand the concern saying, oh, we got a player and he's got, 3 years left? Yeah, but in the NFL, you live in 2 to 3 year chunks anyway, and considering they have to, work with young guys and the defensive line group, how young that front four is, especially the front seven too, when you factor in all the guys there, having a veteran, I think is actually a benefit rather than a detraction here. This Anchor's Way 9893 commented, if the Cowboys can stop the run, I think pass rush will be okay. Then, if the Cowboys can establish the run on offense, they could potentially give Dak a chance to earn that $60 million. If Dak has a competent running attack, doesn't have to be great, just competent, then he can win big games. Then ultimately, Dallas can play close. They have a wide receiver core that can really be a special bunch. There's a really good point here, and I want to highlight this. And I've been pseudo-pessimistic about Dallas. I say they're an 8 to 9 win caliber team this season, and there's a chance they could go a little bit better, a little bit worse. That's sort of my prediction right now. But if you look at this team structure, if they're competent at stopping the run, if they're competent in running the football, don't have to be elite, then I think their defense is going to be fine, right? People forget, Micah Parsons is phenomenal, pass rushing effect. They couldn't stop the run last year against quality opponents, and that happened in 2023 as well. And that's with Micah Parsons, right? So, Micah Parsons played when they got obliterated by Philly twice, right? So, I'm not saying that Parsons is a bad player. Micah Parsons was playing when the Saints dropped 40 on him, when the Ravens ran all over him, right? You can go down the list here, right? Micah Parsons played in a lot of games where the Dallas defense did not play well last season. He played in a lot of games where they didn't play well in 2023. So it's one of those things, having Parsons doesn't immediately solve all your defensive ills, just like getting rid of him doesn't solve them. That being said, I think Kenny Clark with Eberflus, better linebacker play, I think there's a chance this defense, in terms of run defense, goes from being disastrously bad to just baseline competency. I think if this running game that was last year really bad goes to baseline competency, then you look at this team with Dak Prescott and the receiving core and the playmakers he has in this new offense, I could expect a lot bigger things. And if that happens, the upside for the Cowboys is going to be a lot higher than people, especially people like me, think. So I think you bring up a great point here with the Cowboys. If they can just get that baseline competency in those two areas, run defense and running the football, don't have to be great, just baseline competent, they have a chance to really surprise to the upside this season. All right, let's see here. Oh my goodness, there's a whole lot of comments here. This is an interesting one from Tony Dorsett, 33. The cope is crazy. Sam Williams is terrible. Supposed to be a pass rusher and can't do that. Versus the running is horrible. We think Dallas has depth at defensive end, but we just lost all our depth with Micah's departure. It's one of those things where you can be pessimistic about everything. I try to be positive with be realistic, right? You can't just be like, oh, they're going to go 14-3 this year. I don't think they will. But this notion that Sam Williams is terrible, I think, is false, right? You can make an argument that we'll have to see how he does after the injury and didn't have a spectacular preseason. That's all fair. But he did flash signs of being an elite player. And we're not talking about a guy who's going to be, playing 1,000 snaps, playing every single snap for the Dallas Cowboys this upcoming season. He's going to have, 30, 40, 50% of the snaps. He's not going to play, I don't even think more than that over the course of the season, and he can be a game wrecker. He can be a disruptive force, right? And that's all they really want him to be, sort of how, hopefully in that Randy Gregory kind of mold when he was actually doing good things for the Cowboys of just being a disruptive playmaker for the defense in isolated situations. That's what the Cowboys want from Williams, and I think he's got a good chance to be that. We can be overly pessimistic and say, oh, this is a disaster up front. But again, if things go well, there's a chance this could all work out, especially like I talked about earlier. You add in other players that people aren't thinking about, like Overshown as a blitzing linebacker. There's a chance in the aggregate here they can replace Micah Parsons as a pass rusher. Let's see here. TJ No Labels commented, respect to the channel. You're one of the few, and I mean very few, Cowboys content creators that I can stomach, so salute to the good job you're doing. Thank you very much. I appreciate that. But I need everyone to understand the market. The market for whatever position is the baseline for deals. I absolutely hate when y'all talk contracts. If your player is producing anywhere near the top of market, contracts, there's an argument that can be made, then negotiations are had. My point is, it's pointless for you creators to talk about who's worth this and that. To question CD is crazy, LOL. Like, how many receivers are better than him? Dak too. If you look around the league and you see what Tua, Jordan Love, Kyler, Herbert, and even Josh Allen, Lamar makes, then you compare numbers, then Dak's contract isn't too crazy. Mahomes signing a terrible deal isn't Dak's fault. If you don't pay the quarterback, then the alternative is searching and hoping for another at least the same level as Dak. For people to cover the game, you have to know this is my opinion. I think you bring up a great point, and if I was ever critical of or sounded critical of Lamb or Prescott, I'm going to be very clear, I'm not. Right, I think Prescott is good, not great, and I think Lamb is absolutely great, but I don't mean that to be critical. You can make an argument that Prescott is overpaid in terms of compensation versus performance. I think that's a fair argument, but you also bring up an outstanding point. It's not, if an oppositional team just gets their quarterback to sign a hyper team-friendly deal like Patrick Mahomes did with Kansas City Chiefs, that doesn't help the Cowboys out because Dak Prescott and his agent, they're not going to sign a hyper-friendly, team-friendly deal. Like, I mean, the Cowboys may want that, but that just ain't going to happen, right? It's like when Tom Brady was with the Patriots and taking all those super team-friendly deals, right? And it's one of those things where the opposition and the opposing quarterbacks are like, listen, Brady can do that because he's married to Bunch and making $100 million a year, right? You're going to pay me what I'm worth. So there is some situations there that, again, people hold it against Prescott and the Cowboys for giving him that money because they say, look at the Mahomes deal. Well, Mahomes, I mean, come on, he took a super ridiculous team-friendly deal to try and win more championships. Credit to him for doing so. But to expect Prescott to do the same thing when no other quarterback is doing the same thing, and you bring up Jackson and Allen, and those are great points, I think it's an outstanding point. That's a great comment there. Thank you. All right, Delta704 commented, the regular commenter, by the way, thank you. This is the first time I wholeheartedly disagree with you. Jerry Jones isn't cheap because he doesn't pay players at the top, which, by the way, he only does that when he's forced to see all of the recent major contract negotiations versus the ones guys take early. He's cheap because he's not aggressive with our available cap space. Going into another year with an extra $40 million on the books available to make moves, that's without being aggressive. They could make even more room if they were aggressive. Well, I want to differentiate two things here between cash spending and cap space, right? Cap space is just accounting, right? It's just fake. It's financial engineering. Cash space is actually, checks written. It's dollars out, dollars in, right? And so when you see someone have a lot of cap space and say, oh, an owner or an organization isn't spending a lot of money, they're not writing a lot of checks, that can be false. For anyone who's run a business, you understand this kind of happens. This happened to me last year where I actually, and I'll bring up an example, just kind of make up the numbers here. I had to did some work from a client for mine, and I invoiced them, $1,000, right? Let's just say that, $1,000 just to make the math easy. So I had $1,000 of accounts receivable coming in. That was revenue to be recognized coming in, right? At that moment in time, though, I didn't have the cash because the invoice was sent. He had 30 days to pay it, right? So again, if I pulled up my accounting spreadsheet, my books, it said I had $1,000 net of revenue, right? And let's say I had no cost, just to make it easy, $1,000 of net profit, right? Sitting in my books, right? Great, I have $1,000. What can I do with this? Well, I don't have the cash. So I may have $1,000 on the books in terms of profit, but I don't have $1,000 to spend, right? There's a difference between accounting profitability and accounting dollars, which is like salary cap, and actual cash. Jones doles out cash. He doles out a lot of cash. Now, salary cap and accounting, a little bit different story. I agree with you there. They're very conservative, at least have been over the last 5 or 6 years when it comes to how they use the salary cap and the aggressiveness of it. But I think it's because they're much more aggressive on the cash side. I'll be very interested to see what the Cowboys do with this cap space if and when they sign Tyler Smith. They obviously locked up Daron Bland. There's the Pickens question. There's a really good chance they head into next offseason with $40-50 million in cap space with Pickens locked down, assuming he does well. With Bland locked down, Ferguson locked down, Oso Odigizua locked down, and then of course throw Tyler Smith into the fold. Then you start looking around and say, listen, we've got a lot of good players on good long-term deals. Now we can be a little bit more aggressive. I kind of wonder if the fact that Micah Parsons overhang and then CeeDee Lamb and Dak Prescott last year, I wonder if that kind of hampered the aggressive nature for the Cowboys. Very interesting to see what they do with the cap space going forward, especially now that they're actually spending some of it. But I do think it's important to have a distinction between cash out versus salary cap, right? One of them is real dollars, it's cash money, and Jerry Jones spends a lot of that. That's undeniable. That's a fact. He does. But in terms of salary cap, that's financial engineering. That's accounting. Completely different calculus. One is Jerry Jones writing checks. Two is the front office trying to figure out the best way to follow the salary cap rules, right? Two very different things. And I think it's important there. I don't disagree with your comment at face value, but I do think it's important to have a distinction between those two areas. All right. Last comment here. This is from Just a Messenger. Said JJ writes big checks to his own drafted players. I doubt Pat Pickens will get one next year from them. You are 100% correct with one notable exception. In 2018, in the middle of that season, Dallas Cowboys traded for wide receiver Amari Cooper, right? In 2020, early 2020, they signed him to a big extension, right? So again, the Cowboys have recent precedent where they acquired a receiver, a veteran receiver, via trade. He did well, and they gave him a big extension. I think Pickens is following that Cooper model. I think that's just what's going to happen, assuming he plays well, which I think we all expect he will. If he doesn't play well and he stinks for whatever reason, he'll obviously be gone. But when you look at all the moves the Cowboys have made, and I agree with you, they're normally much more likely to have homegrown Cowboys get these big deals than they are to trade and sign guys and give them massive extensions. But to be fair here, they have recent precedent with doing this. They did it with Amari Cooper just a few years ago. I could see them doing the exact same thing here with Pickens if he pans out, which I think we all believe he will. All right, thank you guys for the comments. Again, we're getting closer to Thursday, right? Football is almost finally back. It's going to be an interesting game. I think there's going to be more news to break, some injury updates as we get closer to that, so stay tuned. But until next time, I'm Nick, and this is Saturday Morning Inspection.